Hello. Thank you for the introduction. As she said, my boss could not be here today due to some unforeseen circumstances. So let that be a lesson to all of you. Always have a backup policy in plan for your databases. So this is a presentation about our evolution for the 2 years since Freshful was launched, almost 2 years exactly. Taking something from scratch, from basically zero, and through the challenges and steps we had to face along the way. Small introduction, as you may or may not know, Freshful is an online hypermarket. We deliver groceries, pretty much everything you can find in a physical supermarket or hypermarket, depending on how you consider it. We basically offer a service with technology, convenience, and everything we can to ensure the satisfaction of our customers. I'm this guy, obviously, not the original one. This is our full team. We have recently grown. Our entire development team was started by Marius in the summer of 2021, and myself around a month after he came there. And our challenge was basically, initial challenge at least, having something set up for a very set launch date, which was the 21st of October 2021. And we obviously had to do that with pretty much no idea, and at the beginning, no data, of course. So, I haven't seen any of these movies, so I'm going to assume they were okay. First of all, started with a startup mindset. We had to basically take it step by step and deliver things well, fast and obviously because data as accurately as possible. We only had a few parameters to begin with. With the architecture, as it was already set up, we had to be on AWS. We obviously had to make it fast to deliver it in what was 2 or 3 months, starting from summer until October. And of course, as a startup, you always have the limited budget, which is one of the factors which will later come into effect. The question we had was, do we choose a modern data stack or classical data warehouse where, in fact, our expertise was? We were previously part of the eMAG team for quite a while, and we had a lot of experience on that classical side, and it was a temptation to go in that direction with building what we knew. But of course, we also knew the limitations, the roadblocks which we were going to face, and a few other things which made it impossible. And of course, always going for what you know, it's going to be a little bit boring. So the classical approach, which could have created of MS SQL data warehouse, which we had at the time, use SSIS or whatever ETL tools. ClickView was used there and still is used as the reporting tool. The drawback, of course, that costs a lot of money. It's on-prem. It's not extremely scalable. And data, while as a startup, you don't have a lot of it in the beginning, it tends to explode. So, but of course, because if you chose that option, we would have had the benefit of already built knowledge, and we could just get something off the ground really, really fast. The modern approach, of course, build something in the cloud. Drawbacks, obviously, we had no idea what we were doing. But we had the benefit of a little bit of time before the official launch. So we could afford that time to learn, to think about what we were going to do. And obviously, that had the extremely great benefit of fitting the budget at the point, because you don't really need to pay for a lot of things up front. So we started thinking about what we were going to do, and we came up with, obviously after a little bit of roadblocks, we came up with this. This is the original Pokemon slide, which obviously you have to have. we had a few data sources, and some of them not even completely set up, where we would pull our initial data. We would use Python with pandas to extract that data. The data would and still is stored in Parquet files in S3. We would have a process staging step where we would and still take that data, clean it up, and then move it onto a processed layer again in S3. All of this orchestrated with Apache Airflow. Over that, we have Dremio, our query engine, which also contains some, initially basically all of the business logic. And the query engine sends data into Tableau for reporting purposes. From this, after 2 years, we ended up with this. We kept adding databases as data, more and more requests came in from data from various sources. We kept receiving requests for, I need data from various sources or business sources, basically, and we had to connect to multiple locations, Mongo, Salesforce, BigQuery, various APIs, which we keep building in order to basically skip some steps in the data connection. Again, extracted with Python, upgrading recently to Pandas 2.0. The storage staging layer in Parquet S3. The process is currently being expanded. Pandas 2.0, again, Apache Spark, ending up in Amazon S3 Parquet file, moving on to implementing Iceberg. Also orchestrated again with Airflow and Amazon Glue. Query engine remains Dremio, still very good. Now we added Amazon Athena as mostly a backup at this point in order to have a little parallelism and basically a backup. Tableau reporting tool, and we have added as an extra layer basically a data access layer. We have tried to empower users as much as we can. And we are currently granting access to both of the Tableau and Dremio to pretty much anyone that has the knowledge and the capability or even the desire to learn how to use them. We don't want to be a roadblock in the way if we have requests for data or reports to stand away and say, this is as much as I can do. I don't have the time, I maybe don't have the people, or we grant access to users, we teach them in case they don't already know how to use these tools, and we give them a way for them to prepare their own reports, to extract their own data, to basically remove the need to always go through us if they need to use data. A little highlight of what we had at the beginning and what we added along the way. Our data sources, to go into a little bit more detail of where the data that Freshful uses lies and where we need to connect to get it. We started with simple MySQL and Amazon databases. Immediately after, we implemented RabbitMQ and some data from an on-prem SQL Server databases. And we moved on to adding Mongo, BigQueries, and multiple APIs, which will be actually the biggest point of development in the future. The challenges are that what we had, for example, Dremio has a lot of native connectors, and you can use it to query data, but it doesn't have all of them. So you always need to develop the tools to connect to those data sources, which is why all those APIs come into effect. Some issues, for example, one of the almost original requests, we needed to take some sensitive data from MongoDB, but it's slow, it's unresponsive. The more data it has, the slower it gets, and especially when using Python libraries. which will create a roadblock, and it's actually still is a little bit of a roadblock, but we're moving on from that. Basically, we just want to go around it altogether to remove the necessity to use MongoDB as a data source and just take it from the source that MongoDB technically takes it and is basically just an intermediary. For the moment, we still use Dremio because it has that native connector to extract data from Mongo. Our targets, obviously, Amazon S3 and Parquet files. We started with that. It works very well. It still works very well. Right now, we are adding iceberg tables to that. It's still a work in progress. The good part about S3, you don't really need to worry about storage space, except a little bit in the budgetary aspect of things. It costs money. It always costs money. Add more data, add more money. The Parquet files are fast. They are reacting very well to oral data processing. The current problem and challenge, implementing iceberg tables is not that straightforward. It's an evolution of the issue we started with. Knowledge. You always need knowledge. You can't know everything at every single point of time. So you can just implement things like that. You need to learn. You need to allow yourself time to do these things. Issues we faced along the way. A lot of times files get corrupted along the implementing and the import process, or even the processing part. So we had to find a way around that. We implemented, as you will see a little bit on, buffer layer where we check these files before we start moving, overwriting, merging data, etc., etc. We added also a lot of validation checks. A lot of our jobs right now are basically just data integrity checks, so we can know at any point in time if something's wrong. Your goal always has to be to know these things before somebody signals them to you, because at that point you're already maybe a little bit late. It's not always going to work, but that's always has to be your goal. This is our current S3 folder structure. Basically, we extract data from our sources. They go into a staging layer. From that, they go into a buffer to avoid that issue of the file corruption. They get validated, then they get processed. If you have backups, you move them to backups. You also archive the incoming files for a particular period of time, depending on how important that data is. So you have a very quick and easy way to restore that data without having to always re-import everything if you need them. Shifting from the extract, transform, load paradigm to pretty much a variation of the text extract ETL, sorry, extract, transform, load, to the ELT and PLT process, the extract, load, transform, push, load, transform. Our current process on the right, we started with basic Python scripts with pandas 1.15. We still have them. We still have some of them, of course. We've added a lot. We have recently upgraded to Pandas 2.0 with Arrow backend. This allows for a lot faster processing because, again, as data grows, processing slows down. You need to process more and more. Batches either get larger or you need to decrease the selection and run it more often. Processing data with EMR, again, being on S3, you have a lot of flexibility to just raise a machine, process the data with PySpark, and then in case you have the budget, you can always keep that machine up or just close it again. For the good parts, we have a lot of development flexibility. We didn't have and still don't have a set way to do things. Nobody tells us you need to do this way, you need to restrict the file. We can do pretty much everything we want. Again, if we have the knowledge to do that, and if not, we need to allow time before. However, we try to do the framework approach where when we build something, it's very, it allows for parameterization. You can use it for that purpose, but for a lot of other purpose, or for the set of necessities which derive from that particular point. The challenge is merging and deleting data. Deleting is always a bit of an issue, so you have to take into account that sometimes the sources don't really use the best practices. They delete data when maybe they shouldn't. They don't mark that data as deleted. So you have to take that into account when merging the data. We also have to integrate PySpark flows into Airflow, another point where we had to basically learn and are still learning at this point. Issues, again, as the time passes, data grows, and processing huge amount of data sometimes can crash the import flows depending on what you're trying to do. And this is a step where that parameterization comes in. You need to allow and design for the flexibility to import data as you want. You have to, if it's small enough, just import everything. Batches, various sizes of batches, partitioning, everything you can to allow you the flexibility to avoid this kind of situations, this kind of data crashes. Again, as I said, splitting the data into smaller chunks. You need to move the processing in case it's more complex than the tool allows, as you will again see a little bit later. Process it separately with PySpark, and of course the recent upgrade to Pandas 2.0 already cut a lot of the time necessary for data processing. For scheduling and orchestration, obviously we started with Airflow 2.02. We still use it, and also have added in the meantime Amazon Glue. Again, we are at the point where we need to have backups, to have solutions in case things happen. You need to have an answer, and you need to have an answer fast, usually after some time passes. The good parts, obviously, we don't need to manage it. It's Python-based, so you either know it or it's not that complicated to learn. You can move on, as we did from our classical SQL approach to the current one. You need, however, for the challenges, you need to know how to set up the workers. There are, of course, a limitation of 8 gigabytes of RAM per worker, so you need to wiggle a little bit around that. Same issue as before, processing huge amounts of data crashes the import flow, so you need to find solutions, and again, as a backup solution and mitigation, use eMAG, use Glue to process those big workloads and figure out a way that you don't always need to pass them to the same point in time. Query engines. Of course, obviously, you need one. We started with, again, due to our budgetary restrictions at the beginning, Dremio Community version 17, free, easy to use. It was based on basically SQL, something almost everybody knows, so it was easy to set up. And also an added benefit, besides being easy to set up, it's easy if you want to, at some point, empower your users to have direct access to data. You just have a short training, and it's basically ready to go. Every user, or almost every user, if they are a little bit dedicated, can use this. This is a very easy access point to data. Of course, we had to move from the community edition because in order to give this option to your users, you need security. So for security, you need enterprise, of course. And also we added Amazon Athena, again, as a backup for particular sensitive or important data access points and reports. So again, Dremio can usually, as you will see at the issues, Dremio iterates versions very, very quickly, which means that sometimes you can have bugs, especially if you want to try to keep up with the versions. A solution for this is to always be one version behind what's currently launched. And of course, the Athena implementation is to avoid this Dremio being a single point of failure, as it was the intermediary point between Tableau, between basically most of the reports, if you're not going directly to that for that data access in Dremio. Good parts, as I said, of course, it's SQL-based. It's easy. You can use it. Pretty much everyone can use it. You can point end users directly to that data analysts, which don't always want to have a set and fixed report. They want to have a huge chunk of data and be able to manipulate it. You're always going to get this kind of requests even when it comes to reports, even to data. Can I have everything in one place? You want to say no, but you can't. So yeah, again, easy to deploy. It has caches. Dremio also allows that the creation of reflections, which in case it's a huge data set, you don't always throw a query which loads your engine. You just have the data reflection there. The query goes to the data reflections. It's almost instant. As I said, it can have stability issues if you always go for that latest version because it's bright and shiny. The code always, because we have a lot of the business logic in Dremio, the code tends to get complex. The complexity basically creates another failure point, and it also creates the necessity to move on from that, to move the business logic somewhere else, or at least to split it for complex processing. You need to move it somewhere else or have an option to move it somewhere else. Of course, for mitigation strategies, you can have multi-parallel exports. We used to replicate those critical reports with Athena. So in case there's an issue, okay, some of the less important data will not be available immediately until we can get it back up. But with backup for critical reports, you just switch, just point the user somewhere else. They still have access to that critical data. They don't lose insights or basically time for decisions. And again, as I said, maybe don't go for the bright and shiny ultimate version. Just go for the tested one, which has hopefully all bugs resolved, although that's never the case. For our query engine, we created a data structure kind of similar to basically the one we used in S3. We have a physical dataset layer over the S3 Parquet files that is moved to a staging layer, basically just a select for virtual datasets, select from that physical datasets. The intermediary layer, which holds, as I said, a lot of that business logic. So basically, this is where we apply the requirements made by the business calculations, things like that. And the final layer, which is used to have a very streamlined version for data access in Tableau. And also, you can use this to, if you go for that user empowering, you can grant users direct access to this final layer. They still have a lot of flexibility for maybe some data that gets lost or transformed in Tableau. But here it's in a very more expanded version. They can use this, they can check the data they need, and in case they have that inclination, and there are some, you will find some end users, or you consider them a data consumer, which have actually a lot of knowledge to go beyond this layer. You can then give them access going down, of course, read access only, don't need them to go on and modify what they shouldn't. So this will be a point of development for the future. Give as much flexibility as possible to our users to access the data directly. Of course, Tableau will always be there. It will be for most of the reports, for all those users that don't have the knowledge or specifically the time to go into details here, because this will require time. If you had end users in business, finance, whatever, a lot of the times they won't have the necessary time to allow for this. They will have their usual job, which is consuming data, making decisions based on that data. If they want to go here, you will find that maybe they're not actually allowed to have this time, so you need to push a little bit in that direction to in order to even give your users the opportunity to develop themselves and have a better data access point. For visualization, obviously we started with Tableau. We still have Tableau. We moved through a lot of versions with the support of our providers. The good parts, Tableau is stable and it allows the possibility to create very good dashboards. However, it can be very resource consuming, especially the latest version, so you need to provision for that in AWS or if you have an on-prem system. It has security vulnerabilities which sometimes basically force you to move faster than you would like to through versions, but again, it's good that they have those quick iterations in order to cover those vulnerabilities. We encountered at some point a very annoying bug which repeated itself, which basically delicensed the entire server, cutting access to pretty much everyone until we could fix that. To mitigate it, as I said, we had to do frequent upgrades and, well, in order to cover the latest version, to move the entire solution to a bigger cluster. This is a general non-specific look of our current system, our Tableau folder. We try to group everything for specific departments. This is basically a lot easier for access rights, for security rights. You can just set a group for a particular business case, grant them access. Everything that is under a specific zone, they have access to, and they can move through it. As I said, for the self-service BI, we started with sometimes a user doesn't have the need for Tableau access. Tableau access requires licenses. Licenses cost money. Again, that budget restriction. Sometimes a lot of users only need a little bit of data, just a specific set point. So we started from the beginning for some automated manual, that's a great expression, for some automated CSV exports that they received on email because they didn't really need anything beyond that. We moved, as I detailed, direct Dremio access. If you want it, you can have it as long as you use it. Of course, we need to check, and we always checked for if we grant access to Dremio or if we grant a Tableau license, are you using it? That's a very important point. Tableau also allows for Explorer and Creator license, a variation of basically the same issue. Explorer licenses allow you to create reports on web. Creator licenses allows a lot more from that. You can install the desktop version, and that allows for more flexibility when creating reports. But it also takes a little bit more knowledge from the user side. Again, as the same way as Dremio, these two, the Creator and the Dremio Access, requires a basically dedicated user, which you have to help empower however you wish to present this, to use them. Otherwise, it's basically a waste. We have a subscription-based model in Python where you can receive, if you don't want to use those points, you can receive data as a subscription on email. If you need always a particular set or a couple of particular sets of data and you need them at a particular point in time, that's easy. You set a subscription on each morning or every Monday. You're always going to get that data at the same time. And of course, you need to allow in your own time, and we have added that, we have a provision for that. You need to train them, because it's not, as I said, it's not enough to allow access. You need to train users, and once you allow access, even if you, let's say, don't want to train them, they're going to come to you anyway. They're going to ask questions. How do I do this? How does that work? So it's a training, only it's just on your time and not on the allotted time. Obviously, the target always will be to get users to access data as fast as possible and, well, to spend as least amount of time from your own time to give them that data. If they can learn to access it on their own, that's awesome. We don't keep wasting time and time again to retrieve the same sets of data, or maybe you'll find that there's always some variation of the query. It's like 90% the same thing you give them every time, but they need a little bit of variation, and that takes your own time. So giving them access and teaching them how to use them just removes that completely. Challenges, of course, as I said multiple times, you need to, as a startup, you need to balance the budget, because you always, you have one of three things. You have the knowledge, you have the budget, or you have the time. But two of these are usually missing. So you need to balance that. When you grant users access to data sets, you still need to create those certified, those process data points, because before they reach a point in their knowledge where they can do that themselves, which is a little bit down the line, you still need to allow yourself time to do those data sets in Dremio. And of course, the issues arising from this: how do I join this data? Why is this not here? Why isn't a giant pile of data with everything I need? So always take time. Training users, we found, is obviously very useful, and we also found that they're very open for this. If you ask your users, do you want to learn how to do this? Do you want a training for this? Usually the answer is going to be, yeah, sure, of course. As the same way we did when we started this project. The opportunity to learn something new, maybe it's not always comfortable, it can be a little bit scary, but usually people jump at the opportunity. And of course, the last step there, create documentations, which I know everybody tries to run away from. For computing power, that is where we started. You always have to balance this, because being on AWS, of course, all the computing power eats up your budget. So you try to be a little bit over the requirements, but balance it in a way that you're not coming up short for processing power, for data storage and things like that. And of course, you're not going completely overboard and blowing your budget on things that you might not actually need. For our future evolutions, we are analyzing the prospect of migrating to Dremio Cloud, which is basically a managed service. Creating airflow sensors for our push load transform DAGs in order to avoid some basically time consuming and scheduling issues. We, and I hope everyone, needs to always analyze the prospect of bringing in a new ETL tool. At the worst case, you're going to waste a little bit of time and find out that what you're doing is already fine. That's great. But it might not. So you can always add things into your infrastructure, and our current status on AWS allows this for us. We can always have the option. If we need to change, we'll change. That's going to take work, but we need to know what's out there and be aware of the new things we can use and how we can improve our current process, so we're not stuck in this particular point in time. If you want to move on, we can move on. You know, of course, you need to focus on data lineage, data catalog. You need to always, preferably catalog and document the data to know what you have, to avoid redundancies, repetitions. We're working on a great expectations integration. We're looking at it now. We are testing Airbyte with an Iceberg destination, and of course, this is not the complete set of data which are doing. Basically, this is a little bit of a split. As we saw our evolution, we had an original point in time starting in that summer of 2021 up until launch, well, the day before launch. The middle ground was 1 year, a full year of basically running things, getting data, and seeing how it goes along. And starting October 2021 to now, it's almost soon another year, and we will see how it goes. These are a few graphics of how we evolved from various aspects presented before. These are all created in Tableau. You can see that it's basically a year-on-year doubling of pretty much everything. Dremio datasets, data sources, data size, of course, it's always going to grow. Airflow DAGs, Tableau dashboards, And of course, even though it doesn't seem like a lot, having once you move over tens or even 100 users, that creates a lot of feedback, a lot of questions, and it takes up a lot of your time. This is a split up of basically the time we spend, how we spent it by each period, and how much time each particular section of where we work, specific destination of time is up. As you can see, creating Tableau dashboards eats up a lot of time, which is very important. This is why it's very important to empower your users. The more time you can drop from this, granting users the possibility to access their data directly, the more time you can save here and move on to something else, to learning, to developing, to changing your processes. A good aspect is we managed to keep the administrative and support sides, because this always generates questions. Why are you spending so much time on support? Why are you spending so much time on admin tasks? Same thing, only a visualization for each period split by time zone. Again, this becomes very obvious that creating those final dashboards when you're in a system from zero to basically to the end user, that final step eats up a lot of time because it's detailed. You have to change it. You have to make it prettier. You always have a request. Can you add this thing? Can you remove that filter? Can you add a little bit more data? And things like that. Again, another question which will inevitably pop up, the support split, because having multiple users, having multiple entry points, and handling everything, you're going to have support. Support basically failures, questions, generally small incremental changes requested by certain users, which you can't classify as an evolution. If he needs just a little bit of a change, that will generate support. This is the evolution by a general classification of type of support split from period to period. Basically, we split it by access. This is just a general security request for either access to Dremi or Tableau. Data checks, where you have a user coming to you and saying, I don't understand this data, or more specifically, I think this data is wrong, check it. And of course, issues which pop up, crashes, flows, etc. Visual conclusion. The middle was a bit tough. We encountered some issues along the way. We moved on from that, and hopefully we can move on from that. Now we have some time for Q&A, if you have any, and while you think about your questions, our marketing department prepared a small surprise. 10% if you tried it. If you didn't try it, feel free. 10% of your next order is on us.
Let's give them some time to take the code.
Of course. It's a simple code. You don't need to you can memorize it, just add it.
Thank you, Bogdan. Any questions if you have?
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Can you move to the slide with our architecture at T+2?
Of course, assuming. T+2.
Okay.
I'm assuming you mean the Pokemon slide?
The Pokemon slide, yes.
Of course. That's a lot of...
Okay.
Sorry? Too much clicking.
Okay. First question. What module was the hardest to implement or to integrate in this large architecture?
Well, first, probably the hardest part was coming up with it. When you start from scratch and don't really have, well, not a lot, but basically any experience implementing something from zero. That's the point. If you start from something, it's easy to evolve. But otherwise, For me, I would say was basically, well, when I started, I had no idea about Python. For me, I had to learn it. So I would say the mid-processing part is a bit tougher because you have to, well, learn how to do it, to curate the data, all those safety data checks, duplicates, etc., curating it and getting it to a set point in time, and of course avoiding what I said previously about failures that appear, basically file corruptions, merging data, handling deletions, updates, and doing all that with something which you are in the process of learning. So for me, at least, that middle part is the toughest one.
Okay. The second question, given the times at the end of the presentation, the number of hours spending in maintaining the infrastructure, I understand that the BI part is the toughest because you have to develop a lot of reports, integrate a lot of data. Is this true? Is this the hardest part to maintain?
It's not the hardest, it's just the longest. Unless you're an absolute expert in that particular visualization tool, I don't mean just Tableau here, you're always going to miss or basically not have everything to go, every little bit of detail. And yeah, you can get a basic structure done for pretty much any report you want. But when you go into those details, yeah, but I want this to look a particular way or to emphasize a particular data set or a particular action. Each report has to tell a story to allow a fast decision. Then you need to search for those tiny details, and that takes up a lot of time. It's not hard per se, technically difficult by hard, but it just takes a lot of time.
Okay, and the last one, can you give us an example of a big challenge during the time that you developed this war architecture?
I can give you a lot of examples of big challenges.
Like in the processing part, a challenge or some issues?
In the processing part, which, for example, we didn't know at the start, we didn't encounter it. It initially ran basically very well. Those data corruption, when the files get corrupted, I still can't technically explain, it just popped up. We weren't really prepared. We had to act fast to implement a new way and implement that new buffering and data checks while we were remaking and keeping the current data up to date. Because you can't say, oh, well, I don't have data for now, come back a little bit later. You still have to maintain the current process flow and correct it in parallel. So for me, that's a particular setting point, difficult point. And for others, it's usually connected to those bugs I mentioned, for example, on Dremio and Tableau. They each, at a particular point in time, they throw a big issue at you, which sometimes you can't really solve on your own. Being an external application, you have to go through their support, to their documentations, how-to guides, etc. Again, time. So does that answer your question, or?
Yes, okay. And one extra question, do you think the balance between the open source tools and the enterprise tools, it's well in this architecture?
Can you say that again?
The balance between implementing open source solutions and integrate enterprise tools like Tableau or Dremio.
Assuming I understood the question, from my point of view, you can't really do absolutely everything. So you will need some quick fixes or quick solutions, not a fix. And if it's already there, for example, Dremio, at the beginning, it was there, and I cannot emphasize this enough, it was free. Even though it has some obvious issues, you have connectors. You don't need to develop something to go to your data. You can just use it to get there. So you allow for time for those open source tools. It's fun. You can learn something new and develop it, but you're going to run out of time at some point, and you need to use them. And I strongly recommend you do, because you need to have a balance overall, at least for me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I saw something there.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions, but I think you already partially answered. Why did you choose Dremio? I see you already have BigQuery there in the picture on the left side. Was it something because of costs, or?
That's at least at the beginning. If you don't have a huge budget and you need to get something off the ground with a particular set, of course, that was, this isn't our starting point. We tested multiple things before we arrived at Dremio. It just was the best fit for our current need. BigQuery, we didn't have it actually at the beginning, and for now it's basically a data source for us. It's not really a tool, well, at least not yet. So yeah, you can pretty much test anything you need, and it's actually recommended for you to do that to make an idea. Some things will be fairly obvious from the beginning. This is not what I need.
And what else did you test in the beginning?
Tested supersets. We had several things that we tried. This was very quickly became obvious.
Okay. And can you give us an idea of the scale of data, how much data you have, and how many tables, how many, I don't know, materialized views or stuff like that?
Of course. Maybe I moved through it too quickly. Let's go to one of those reports at the end. It's back. For example, data sets. These are the data sets we, well, let's say started. We'll give that a few months time frame there. We now currently have over 1,000 data sets. The data size is there, although we technically try to keep it down. We don't archive huge amounts of data, especially since we already have data sources. The raw data is still there.
So that's 300 terabytes or what?
No, it's not that big. It's,
okay, it's 300 gigabytes.
Yeah.
And how do you manage 1,000 data sets? I mean, the data governance part.
A lot of it is set. Once you create it, you don't really need to change it again. It's due to that structure for the staging, certified, and app structure. Once it goes into staging, it's going to be set. Once you have something in certified, you may need to modify it from time to time if the calculation or the process or the business rule changes, but you don't really need to go into each individual one. And that takes the number of active maintenance a lot lower, but it's still a lot.
Do you keep track of how much it's being used? I mean, do you use all those 1,000 data sets? Are they being queried?
Yeah,
frequently?
Dremio, you can actually set up your own calculation. And Dremio, if you go into it, it shows what you're using and what's queried. You can go to each individual data set and see 200,000 queries that's used, or you can see one with 6. You can probably safely remove that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. I have one question. How big is your team?
Again, it was on a slide. We are 4 developers and 1 data analyst, and this is fairly recent. For the first year, we were 2 people. Now we're 4.
Thank you.
Strictly for development.
Another question, Bogdan.
Hello, Bogdan. Just a curiosity, more or less. So this project started 2 years ago, and I can see for your architecture combine different tools now for processing, ingesting, and also reporting the data. So I saw that your team is also small. This requires some knowledge in different tools with different providers. So my question is, when you started this, you also evaluated like a product like Cloudera, where it's a full stack for everything? And if not, after 2 years, you are still happy with this choice of architectures?
To start at the end, yeah, we are still currently happy with this. At the beginning, again, as I said, we evaluated some options, but again, you have budgetary restrictions, so you need to mold yourself to them. This is why a lot of that do-it-yourself open source tools come in. We do evaluate and we keep doing that. If at some point in time something gets, it's no longer suited to our needs, even if that's processing, even if that's budget, it can get too expensive, or maybe not doing what it's supposed to do, we will change. We allow ourselves time, specifically time, because you need to, if you just think about something, or I'll take a look at some point in time, yeah, that's not gonna work. You're not really gonna do that. You need to set time aside. This is the time I have to go check out something and test it with a little bit of data that we have, with some testing data, batch, and see if it's maybe better than what you're currently using. But you need to allow yourself time to do that.
So what were the, let me say, principal requirement when you started this? The budget and what? What else?
Can you say that again, please?
What you took in consideration when you chose this architecture? Budget and?
Budget and either knowledge, if you have it, and how much you have it, and the time to acquire that knowledge, because it's always time and money, and you need to have at least one of them. If, for example, for what you said, if you need to move on to something, if it takes a huge amount of knowledge to implement that, you might want to look at it if you can allow that much time in order to change. You will still have to do everything you're currently doing. You can't just abandon your reports, your data, your users. You need to set time aside. And yeah, if you can learn it, great. If you can learn it fast, even better. But that's a consideration. It's a huge consideration. For us, at least at the beginning, we didn't have a lot of this knowledge. And it was a fairly intense process at the beginning to learn it while you do it. It fails, learn why it failed, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Learn while it fails. So cool. Any other questions?
Okay,
I guess
that's
that's it.